If I could just blow one thing up today, it would be fabric, because it's a fabric show, right? Hey everybody, welcome to Making It Fun. I am your host, Rob Appell from Michael Miller Fabrics. I am so excited you are here. It might be a Wednesday and it might be any other day of the week, because we have these wonderful videos on YouTube for you to enjoy anytime, day or night. Get creative with me, enjoy what we're doing here. We're having a blast. If you're new to the show, I like to make quilts. I like to make stuff. I like to be full of energy. I like to try to teach stuff, and it's a wonderful place to be. I'm gonna try to do about a 30-minute show today, and even though said I was gonna blow something up, I was completely kidding. I'm gonna blow out some lettering. I had a request quite a while ago to do some lettering based videos. And so lettering, like on this awesome quilt we've got right here, and other lettering I've done before, I often approach with applique. So I'm gonna go back a project or two and touch base on something fun. So we probably should dive pretty quickly into our show and tell for the today's project, because the show and tell will help us know what we're going to be working with. But I do want to remind you, we'll be having a wonderful prize giveaway at the end of the show. If you've never seen one of my Making It Fun episodes, I've got a mystery box of questions right here, and at the end of the show I ask that question, and then you can comment and possibly win a prize. The prize, as you can see, my wonderful friend here, Mike, is super excited about today. It's part of our new Strata collection at Michael Miller, and that's also part of the show and tell. So let's show that show and tell as we get rocking and rolling. So this just shipped out in June. Strata is a 4 colorway series of basics and, or what I should say, textures. And I love textures because I love landscapes. I love working with stuff that can be used a million different ways. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous fabric line, and I'm not exactly sure the best way it's going to translate. So let me hold it just kind of still for a moment. So you can see in this colorway, like I said, there's 4 different colorways coming out throughout the year. This one is called Graphite. I just saw a beautiful quilt that was on the Michael Miller social media. I believe it was on their Facebook page, and it was very nautical in feel. It was very light in the background, and they used triangles of these different colors, and it was just gorgeous. And I love the way it looked. Let me flip these over and put them on the overhead camera for you, so you can see a little bit. Maybe if I hold still right here, you can see some of the textures. So incredible, like a rock or wood, or it could be skies, or oh gosh, all kinds of different stuff. I love this kind of Pollock splatter in here. Of course, this one right here is just super, super cool. Reminds me of like alligator skin, especially when you see it here in the green, or dirt is the name of this colorway, I believe. So anyways, it's just really, really fun. And you know, I've used Michael Miller fabric starting with the Fairy Frost years ago in textures in my landscapes, especially in my endangered species quilts. And so when I look at a line like this, I see it as just shades of color and incredible things that we can do, whether you like to patchwork or applique. This is going to be a fantastic line. So this just shipped out to the local quilt shops. Please bounce into one of your local quilt shops, give them a hug for yourself, give them a hug from Rob here, and then ask about the new Strata collection from Michael Miller Fabrics. And the graphite color is awesome. I hope it looks as incredible at home on your computers as it looks here in person. You know, I've been playing recently, and I should kind of show off a little bit the studio, but it's still a little bit of a mess over there, but we're getting really, really close, and I've got some new lights up and stuff. So obviously it looks fantastic in here today. So that was show and tell 1. Show and tell 2 is a show and tell you've seen before, but I wanted to come back to it because 1, it's just a great, great fabric line called Hero by Sandra Clemens, one of the licensed designer at Michael Miller Fabrics. But I also wanted to do the show and tell really quick. Oops, how quick was that? Okay, so I've got the fun family. Then basically it's little superhero girls doing fun stuff. But what I wanted to point out is this print here, which is the theme print for the project I started with, but I did mine in the graphite of the gray colorway. It's a double border print. So this running cityscape was what I used when we did the mitered corner technique. So we're just gonna set those aside. We're gonna start jumping quickly into the conversation for today's project. So we're out of show and tell, we're into how-to mode now. And let me just hold this up, make sure I've got my lightning bolts facing the right way. I would not want to be electrocuted. So a while back, I did this really fun video on how to miter corners, but not only miter the corners, here, right? But how to use that running border print on those large border prints for what you could do. So the inside of this quilt, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. I knew I wanted to do some sort of exploding there, so the dynamite idea. Exploding lettering, right, on the inside center. So that inside center is where we're gonna be working today. We're gonna basically make Making It Fun lettering explode out of the middle of my project here as a reverse applique. So let's slow down and back up a little bit more about applique and reverse applique and what does it all mean. So if you look at the back wall quilt here, these white letters, cotton couture of course, were applied or appliqued down on top of the patchwork. So the entire patchwork was done. You can see the seams kind of running through some of the lettering. And then this white cotton couture was applied onto the top of the whole quilt top. Now, most likely, I didn't make this quilt myself, but I can kind of feel for it, and I know a lot about this kind of stuff. Most likely it was done with a fusible web process. And in the fusible web process, every time you're using it, you're using a paper-backed, or at least I should say when I use my Heat and Bond Feather Light, I'm using a paper-backed glue process. And so my letterings will be transposed. My letterings will be backwards. So this artist used the font from Michael Miller, and they basically put the letters backwards one way or another, and I'm gonna show you my favorite technique here in a second, and created those letters. And these letters were nice. Well, these letters are beautiful is what I should say. The point I'm trying to make is each one of these letters is independent, and therefore you have to place each one of the letters onto the quilt top individually, iron it into place, and then stitch around the raw edge one way or another. This was blanket stitched. Of course, you could free motion, you could satin stitch whatever you want. Now, the problem when it comes into lettering, especially if you're dealing with a company logo or something like that, is you want it all to be perfect. So the kerning or the spacing in your lettering and all of this is all very, very important. So in my Making It Fun lettering, one of the things I want to point out really quickly is I actually chose a font that is mostly a script. So most of my letters are connected in one way or the other, and it made it very easy to get those letters cut out inside of this super cool bursting shape. Now, like I said, I did a bunch of prep work with my buddy Mike here, and we made a little movie about the prep work so that you wouldn't miss a step. So let's go ahead and roll that clip. Oh, before we roll that clip, why don't you take a moment, get yourself some fresh popcorn, and get yourself comfortable because we've got just a few moments here of our prep work. Okay, Mike, roll the clip. You can see here Mike got busy determining the size of the center of the quilt for us. Then he jumped over on the computer and started typing up the logo so we could import it into Google Docs and make our font come to life. We chose a font that had nice scrolling features so the letters were connected, and then we opened Post Eraser, which you need to download from the internet. Post Eraser will allow us to print whatever size we want, but we're going to need to import a JPEG, so you might have a little file converting to do after you get out of Google Docs. Get your sizes all set the way you want, and now you can choose the actual maximum output size, convert it to a PDF for printing, and send it over to your printer for your master copy. Okay, thanks a lot, Mike, for bringing me those pages. I appreciate you getting those ready for me. Now what we need to do is we need to match these up, and in order to match these up, you can see there's a bit of an overlap or a gap. So basically, I'm just gonna find that straight line within there, and I'm gonna trim it down, and I just basically need enough off of here that I can see where I'm going when I put the pages together. This doesn't have to be super, super accurate because we are basically gonna tape this page here over the second page where that overlap was. So we're just kind of lining these up, and you can see there by following the letters. And again, this is just for a tracing map, so it even doesn't still have to be that accurate. Put just a piece of tape, a small piece of tape to hold that there. Okay, so now I've got my pages all taped together. That's gonna work beautifully. Once I have them taped together, now I'm going to go ahead and cover them with fusible web. Now with my fusible web, remember we measured the center of the quilt project, and that was about a 35-inch square. And I want my explosion to be less than that, and I want all of my explosion on the fusible web. So I'm going to tape off quickly about a 30-inch square of fusible. This is 17 inches wide, so I'll have a 30 by 34. And then I'm going to set this in the center, and that way I can do all of the imagery as I go around. Remember, this is just setting itself up for the reverse applique. As I get ready to go ahead and put my pieces of fusible web together, I want to butt the edges together. I don't want any overlap. Then I'm just going to take a little bit of my blue painter's tape here, and I'm going to put a couple of spots actually out on the edges just to kind of hold it all together. Again, my goal is to not have to iron or cut or draw on those blue pieces of tape, but I may need to. And that's why I'm using the blue tape, is that way as I iron around it, it won't be an issue. Clear tape will melt under the iron. Okay, now when we're doing this, it's very important to point out, when we are using fusible web, because we have a paper and a glue side, what's going to happen is we're going to get a transfer of the design. So right now this is legible, we need to make it illegible, and then it becomes really hard to trace. This is where a light table comes in. It's super handy. Let me grab one of those. Happen to have a giant one from Daylight right here. So we're just going to slide that under the table. So with the use of the light table, it's much easier to see on the back side of the paper. Of course, you could have drawn from the front side, let it bleed through onto the back side, and then trace. But what I really wanted to do is just make this super fun, simple, and easy. And so that was why we're doing it this way. Letters are traced down, and again, it doesn't have to be beautiful because these are going to be cut lines. I just need to make sure that I can see everything I need to do, and then I'll be putting it back in some of these spaces. So I want to put a K for keep and a K for keep on that. Now that we have that image done, what we can really do is we're going to go ahead and build our explosion for our burst. And so I want angles, and first what I do is I just kind of draw the angles I want coming out of the lettering, maintaining the fact that I had already determined our square. Once the image is prepared on the back of the fusible web, I'm going to go ahead and chop it down a little bit, and we're gonna start committing to some of our fabrics, but we're also gonna do a little auditioning with this reverse applique process. It's gonna be really fun. So I do need to chop down, and I basically want to take away as much of the excess of this without cutting right on the lines. I want to save the cutting of the lines for once it's already ironed to the back of the fabric, because that's how we get a really nice crisp edge. The heat and bond will behave like a fray check on these edges. So I'm just rough cutting down now to save fabric. We now have this all set up. We do not want to cut out the letters until it's on the fabric because we want those rough edges fray blocked by the glue, basically is what I'm trying to say. My goal was to have this beautiful fabric from the Hero line looking like it was exploding, falling apart, pixelating, tiling out, and I wanted the letters to be on the inside in this wonderful purple cotton couture. I'm going to cut out the burst because that's what I want to use. If this purple doesn't show up enough, I can switch it out to white or green or orange or whatever I want to do, which is really fun. So we're going to get to the auditioning process here. I'm going to take a moment and get any of the creases out that are necessary. Another great thing to do when you're dealing with a fusible web like this is make sure we can get as much of it as we can right on top of our ironing surface. I'm just going to cheat over to one corner. Avoiding my selvage pinholes, and then starting at one end, I'm going to press. This is the heat and bond feather light, so it's just going to take 2 to 3 seconds to bond. And now what I'm really doing is kind of working on one half of the fusible web. There's a splice going this way, that's where that tape is. Okay, a good quick little visual reminder. Remember, the letters are backwards because it's on the back side of the fabric. When we hold this up, we want to be able to read the letters properly through. So just making sure, if you've never worked with fusible web, you understand your letterings need to be transposed even as a reverse applique method like we're doing today. It's all cooled down, so the first thing I want to do is cut these edges. I want a nice straight line, so I could actually even use a 45mm rotary cutter, not so easy for me to say, and a ruler And again, these were just my guidelines. So I'm going to come through here and I'm going to cut as close to on these edges as possible. You can see how nicely the 28mm Olfa cutter is working though for these kinds of cuts also. And because it's fused, if you ever come into a little gap like that and you cut a little too far down, it's okay. When it sets onto the fabric, it'll lay nice and flat. No one will see that little overcut. And whoa. I'm going to set this aside safely over here for a second. I want to show you one last little trick when it comes to applique prep. I don't store any fabric with fused scraps in my stash. I have one stash for fused and one stash for unfused. So I basically am now going to take a second and come around here. And again, that's why these smaller cutters are nice, is they're kind of designed to whittle around spaces. All right, now to cut out these letters, we're going to do it with finesse. And so I'm going to use my Shark 14mm rotary cutter and a small pair of applique scissors. I want you to use what works best for you. If you've never seen this tool, I want you to hold it like a pen. You can see I just got nice and close to my work. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to follow the edge of these lines. And I use my left hand to kind of rotate. And these lines you really want to take a nice job and do them just right. So if you find that it's easier for you to do it with scissors, please feel free. Hey, as you cut the letters out, if you will keep them in their entirety, you'll be able to use that letter later on as another letter because you're technically creating both the reverse applique and the straight applique for the font. So just set those aside, do your best. I'm going to cut all of these pieces out and be right back with my burst ready to audition those new fabric colors behind it. All right, I hope you've got a little bit more understanding of how I got us to this point where I have my fantastic print that has got now the letters reverse appliqued stuck through here. I've got a few little parts and pieces of the letter, the holes in the letters are set aside here. We're going to put those in last. Now the other thing I've done is I've created the background. So once I auditioned and made sure I love the way this purple, and it does look beautiful by the way, love the way the purple goes in, I traced around the outside shape, and that's even why I have this word up in there, so that again, I'm creating a fused color that will be the letters in the reverse applique. They'll fill in, but they won't expand past the burst. Now, one of the things I want to point out really quickly while I get my workspace ready is whenever you're doing this, you want to choose colors that work appropriately. If I was going to do something like that and the burst was lighter than the letters and you can see that weird bleed through, then you would want to make your burst the exact same size for the undercolor so you don't see any weird gaps in color or shading or value changes. You've seen it in applique quilts before. You weren't sure what it was that you didn't like about it. I guarantee that's what you didn't like about it. Now, that being said, I'm goofing off over here. I'm gonna get my iron nice and warm because I wanna have a nice flat surface to work on. But basically in the center of my quilt, I have a crease that was made by folding the quilt. And I want that there to get my letters centered. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, what I did originally was I took my quilt, folded it in half, and just kind of finger pressed it. But you're gonna wanna do it the opposite direction as well, okay? So now, again, fold, finger press, and I'm not hitting it with the iron. I don't want a strong crease in there. I really just want a couple of visual checkpoints. And now as I open this back up, I'm going to take a moment and make sure that the orientation of my lightning bolts is upright. Okay, now that it's upright, I'm going to start by kind of dry fitting my purple underlay in place. I've got my up, so now I'm going to peel the paper off. There's no reason to have the paper on any longer. The paper certainly makes it easier to trim your fabrics, cut nice accurate lines. Okay, and now I also have my lettering here where my burst shape here. And as I get in here, I want to peel away at the paper very carefully. Making sure that I get it all off around all of that lettering. Now then, the key is, first, don't panic, don't worry. This is just gonna feel a little weird and sloppy for a moment. It just kind of feels like you just got a bunch of stuff stuck to a bunch of stuff, but if you'll take it nice and slow, and that's why I wanted to have my purple backing, my solid cotton couture backer down there first, so I can just now start to slowly untangle a little bit of that sticky fabric mess I was making. And I shouldn't even say sticky because it's not sticky. Make sure that all the parts of the lettering are accounted for. And you may notice that I'm using kind of a patting technique. As I get the center dialed in the way I like it, and I'll go through here, just kind of pat at it, because with all of these little pieces and shapes, they certainly can move around a little. So you want to make sure that you get everything back together as nice as possible. Oh yes, now all we need to do is come back in and apply some of these little cutaways that we had. I've had the lettering sitting next to the sewing machine over here, so that way I can bring the lettering over and I can see, oh, whoops, I put that little part in upside down. So tweezers will definitely be a friend in a position or a job like this. So now I know that I'm going to set that in there. So I have taken a moment and just double checked to make sure I've got all the lettering just the way I wanted. And during that moment, I was heating up the iron all over again. Tweezers or a stiletto or something like that is a wonderful way to manipulate your shapes if that helps you much. Now that we have a hot, dry iron, but we have a bunch of little pieces possibly that could move around, I want to start in the middle. And remember, I'm heating through 2 layers now, the print and the cotton couture. So I'm pressing for my full 3 seconds, and I'm going to start by ironing the center and working my way out and around while I really bond these layers. The bonding of the layers also really helps settle down the edges, and so I should use this moment to point out auditioning of color. If your colors were pretty close in shade and you've ironed them down, you may notice that the letters are not as high contrast as you thought. There's not as exposed as you expected. And the reason that is the shadow, while you had your fabric up in the air, or there was that gap in between, made it look differently. I've had that happen on a couple of my projects in the past. So now that I've actually ironed this down, it is probably more legible, easier to read the lettering than it was when the letters were floating a bit, because that has made the lines a little bit more crisp. I'm assuming that's how it looks from where you're at. I know that's how it looks from where I'm at, and I'm super pleased. Okay, everything is pressed down and secured, so the next steps for this particular project would be to get your backing and your batting together and go ahead and baste it all. And then if you were like me, you would do free motion machine quilting, and you would start by stitching around these interior lines of the lettering to anchor everything, then the exterior, and then free motion machine quilt in the background that way. Now you could of course do other kinds of edge finishing. A lot of folks will do a satin stitch or a blanket stitch along the edges. The straight edges here would be very easy to blanket stitch or satin stitch. Satin stitches would be a little more tricky on these points, but the satin stitching around the curves and all of this might make it a little bit more than what you want, or might make it a little bit kind of muddy in the design. So I will have a nice crisp line right in here. So I'm going to do free motion. Of course, I've just gotten a new long arm, the Juki J350, and it's set up like right there. I can see it from where I'm standing, and I just need to put some bigger backing on it. I have the batting already loaded, and I think I'm going to use this project for kind of a good place for me to practice. We all need to practice. We all can learn something, and long arming is new to me. And so it's so new to me, I didn't even think about putting on the correct size background. I played with it just a little to test the machine, and it works beautifully. But I do need to load larger backing, and I need to make myself some leader strips and all of that kind of stuff. So hey, new videos are coming. I'm thinking about this right now. Wouldn't that be a great video? Leader strips for the long arm. Of course it would be. So ching, check that off. Now, let's slow down, back up. We've got a prize to give away in just a second, but let's just do a little review on Appliqué. These letters here are appliqued individually. They're put in on top, just like my little letters here could have been put, you know, just right there on top, sure. And then they were ironed down, and they were stitched with a with a blanket stitch here. This is what we consider reverse applique because it's coming through also. And so we have 2 layers of applique. Same thing, I've cut out the lettering as I just showed you. I will go back in and free motion machine stitch these. I don't want that big heavy edge on there. So we're gonna be just like this for here. Easy peasy, 2 ways to approach your lettering. I chose the reverse applique because it allowed me to keep my letters properly kerned and made it very easy for the explosion. But that's why I wanted to talk about both different styles, because with each new quilt will come a perfect way to approach that design. But one design may be better for one quilt than the other. So I hope you were able to kind of decipher what I was trying to explain there. Either way, it's time to give away a prize. Now, what's really fun about these new kind of live, kind of recorded videos I'm doing is right now you're all watching the video from last week, because it technically will be a week apart. And I already do see some great questions coming in. I checked them right before I started recording today's video. So one of the questions from last week's video was from Sandy. Last week's video was the postcard tutorial, and I did some binding around a fabric postcard. Sandy's question was, hey, couldn't you glue those edges down of the binding instead of machine stitching it? Because I did this micro stitching. Absolutely. On the postcard, you certainly could glue them. Heat and Bond actually even has a really good liquid glue that's got a fine little tip that would go around the edge beautifully like that. But on a real quilt, if you're hearing this differently, on a real quilt, I would always sew the binding down versus glue the binding down. Some folks will glue first and then sew to keep it accurate, but the postcard is just a fun little project. So if you'd like to just glue that before you mail it off to your friend Sandy, fantastic. Thanks for watching last week's video and having a great question. Now, this is not a question, but a fabulous comment from Anthony. Anthony called me out on being negative. And Anthony and everybody else, I do apologize. I referred to myself in a negative way in the last video, and you are so correct. We are a community that is here to support each other, and it starts by supporting ourselves. The best thing we can do for ourselves, other than be creative and work with fabric, of course, is to think highly of ourselves. And you know, look how big this hair and head is. I do think very highly of myself. And sometimes I put myself down to try to keep myself humble on camera. And so let's find a better way for Rob to be entertaining than be insulting too. So Anthony, I apologize, and thank you for reminding me how important the positive energy at Making It Fun is, and I will do my best to continually make it positive while being a goofball as well. And a goofball is one of my superpowers, certainly not an insult. So thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Anthony, for having comments so quickly, so ready that I could drop them into today's video, even though you technically just typed them. So awesome. Oh, and then last week's question, I haven't actually chosen that winner. So I can tell you there will be a winner chosen for last week's video. And that person was now chosen when you've watched this video. But the question last week is if you had a magic button, and within that magic button you could press it, what would it do? Something like that. This is great. So many people said what their magic button would do would allow them to enjoy more of the Making It Fun videos. There is that magic button, everybody. It's called subscribe. Hit the subscribe button on the Making It Fun with Rob Appell channel and hit the little bell to be notified, because I still do some live videos and you'll get notified that way. But of course, that is your magic button. You've asked for it, I've created it, and I've shared it with everybody else on YouTube as well. Hit the button that says subscribe and you will not miss another moment of the super fun action here at Making It Fun. Now, on to today's prize. I've got 4 of them because I'm a big bigger quilter. I actually like small and medium quilts too, but these are the little 5.5-inch squares, the new Strata. I figured you would need at least 4 of these to make something awesome, so one person will win 4 awesome Strata Michael Miller fabric packs in the graphite color. That's the word I'm looking for. The way this works is we've got this beautiful box of mystery questions. I am going to now open the box of questions. I am going to randomly select in here, and oh, there was another comment that said I should leave the other questions that I've already asked out of the box. So those are over there somewhere. Here's one. Okay, what's it say? Question: what would your perfect murder weapon be and why? I did not write all of these questions, but I do like this one, of course. So the question is, what would your perfect murder weapon be and why? And more importantly, I'm asking you the mystery questions so that you can comment in the feed below this video right here. Make sure you are subscribed to Making It Fun with Rob Appell. Make sure that you answer what your perfect murder weapon would be, and one of you will be selected on the following Friday, and we will mail your prize. I'll email you first and let you know you're the winner, and then I'll mail your prize to your local quilt shop of your choice. That way it can be really fun and we can encourage the quilt shop. Sometimes I'll put a little goodie in there for the quilt shop as well. You can take a picture getting your prize in the shop, send it back. Again, like Anthony said, we're a community here together. We're all supporting each other, and I think this is a fantastic way to make it super fun. Got to leave this question out of the box so we don't ask it next week. I did love that feedback as well. See, I read all of these comments. I love what you're all doing out there. That said, it is time to wrap it up. Actually, in a few days, I am hitting the road for a little family vacation, heading north up into Oregon. So if you see me out there, say hello, come and give me a big hug. And until then, do everything you possibly can to keep making it fun. I'm glad to see you're still there. Hey, if you insist on spending all day on YouTube, great with me. Please check out a few of my other videos. I think they're fantastic. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified. We'll see you next time for another helping of fun.